Hello and welcome to History in the Shadow. Before we begin, please take a second to subscribe to our channel, because here we uncover the hidden stories of the world, the tales that textbooks rarely mention, and the powers that once shook the earth but are now almost forgotten. Imagine this for a moment. A dynasty that controlled lands bigger than many European kingdoms combined. A dynasty that balanced the ways of the nomad and the sedentary. A people who ruled both horseback warriors and city dwellers, a state that terrified China itself and held its emperors in check. They were neither pure nomads like the Mongols nor entirely sedentary like the Han. They created something unique, a hybrid empire. Yet, today, most people outside academic circles have never heard their name. This is the story of the Khitan and their Liao Dynasty. A world power that rose between China and the steppes and then vanished into the shadows of history. The story begins with the Khitan people, a nomadic group from the regions of Manchuria and Mongolia. For centuries they lived in the shadow of greater powers, the Tang dynasty of China to the south, Turkic and Mongolic tribes to the west, and Korean states to the east. The Khitan were considered just another steppe tribe, living by horseback, herding livestock, raiding neighbors, and surviving in a harsh landscape. But they possessed a quality that many tribes did not. They learned quickly, and they adapted. They were not content to remain in the shadows of China. The turning point came in the 9th and 10th centuries, when the Tang dynasty collapsed into chaos. China was weak, fragmented, ruled by warlords and petty kingdoms. Into this vacuum stepped a Khitan leader named Yelü Abaoji. In 907, he was elected Khan of the Khitan, and he immediately set his sights on something greater. He began to build not just a tribe, but a dynasty. He united the Khitan clans, trained armies, and adopted elements of Chinese statecraft. He declared himself emperor in 916 and founded what we now call the Liao Dynasty. What made the Liao unique was that it did not choose between the ways of the nomad and the sedentary. It embraced both. On one side, the Khitan kept their steppe traditions, horseback archery, nomadic camps, and tribal leadership. On the other side, they created a Chinese-style bureaucracy to rule over their new subjects, many of whom were Han Chinese. The Liao state was run by a dual administration. One government for the Khitan and Nomads, another for the Chinese and sedentary populations. This was a brilliant balance that allowed the Liao to control vast and diverse territories without collapsing under the weight of contradictions. Under Yelü Abaoji and his successors, the Liao dynasty expanded rapidly. They pushed west into the Mongol steppes, south into northern China, and east toward Korea. They formed a power that China could not ignore. The fragmented kingdoms of China, particularly the northern Song Dynasty, found themselves constantly pressured by the Liao. The Song, though culturally advanced, were militarily weak compared to the horseback armies of the Khitan. Repeatedly, the Song were forced to pay tribute to the Liao just to keep peace. Gold, silk, and precious goods poured into Liao treasuries, funding their dynasty for generations. Times were good for the Liao, but their rule was not just about war and tribute. They developed a distinctive culture. They created their own script, called the Khitan Large Script, to record their language. They patronized Buddhism, building temples that blended Chinese and nomadic styles. They created cities but still maintained their nomadic way of life, living seasonally in camps and palaces. It was this hybridity, not fully steppe, not fully Chinese, that made them unique. But such power brought enemies. To the west, the Jurchen people were rising, a new force that would one day create the Jin dynasty. In the 12th century, the Jurchen united and struck at both the Song and the Liao. The Song, seeking to break free from the heavy burden of tribute, allied with the Jurchen against their old rivals. Together, they launched a coordinated attack. The result was devastating. The Liao, after nearly 2 centuries of power, were overthrown. Their cities fell, Their rulers were forced into exile, and their dynasty collapsed. Yet, the Khitan did not simply vanish. Some of them migrated westward under the leadership of Yelü Abaoji, forming what is known as the Western Liao, or the Khitan Liao. There, in Central Asia, they ruled over a multi-ethnic population of Turks, Persians, and Chinese refugees. They kept alive the Liao legacy for another century, holding cities like Balasagun and interacting with Islamic states. Their presence was so strong that even the early Mongols felt their influence. Eventually, however, the Khitan were destroyed by the Khwarezmians and later the Mongols, and with that, the Khitan truly disappeared from history. What makes the Liao dynasty remarkable is not just that it ruled, but how it ruled. It showed that a nomadic people could build a sophisticated state without abandoning their heritage. It showed that an empire could govern different cultures with balance rather than erasure. And it showed that between the great powers of China and the steppe, there was room for an alternative power that blended both worlds. Yet today, how often do we hear their name? Students study the Song, the Jin, and the Mongols, but few study the Liao. The Liao are a shadow in the records, their legacy erased or absorbed by those who followed. Their scripts remain deciphered only in part. Their temples are ruins scattered in remote lands, and their culture is largely forgotten. But for 2 centuries, they were a superpower that shaped East Asia. Imagine if the Song had not allied with the Jurchen. Imagine if the Liao had held out longer, or if their Western successors had resisted the Mongols. History might have been very different. But history is not written in what-ifs. It is written in the rise and fall of powers, and the Liao fell, leaving only echoes. And this is why we call them a lost power, because they ruled in the light but now exist only in the shadows of memory. So the next time you think of China's neighbors, do not think only of the Mongols or the Manchus. Remember the Khitan. Remember the Liao dynasty. Remember that between the great empires, there were powers that refused to be silent, powers that for a brief moment shaped the world. And if you found this story fascinating, please subscribe for more. We will continue to bring you the hidden histories of the world's forgotten powers. Thank you for watching. This is History in the Shadow.